Start. So let's start first of all just by having you say your name and spell
Okay.
it for us.
Yeah. My name is Bob Shea.
And could you give the last name spelling?
Oh, Shea.
All right, great, thank you. And my name's Bob Bauman, and today's date is November 13th of 2013. And we're conducting this interview on the campus of Washington State University, Tri-Cities. So maybe if we could start by having you talk about when you and your family arrived here at Hanford, and talk a little bit about maybe your sort of first impressions of the place.
Well, my dad came over here in early March of 1943 from Missoula, Montana, as a construction carpenter. And then my mother and brother and I came here after school was out in 1943 from Missoula, Montana. And we arrived, interestingly, the night of, or the morning, very early morning of June 20th, 1943, in the Pasco train depot there. And the reason I say it's quite interesting because that day happened to be my dad's birthday, my mom and dad's anniversary, and Father's Day. So it was kind of a big day. And but at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I might mention that to me it was fascinating because I was 10 years old there in June of 1943, and when we arrived at the train depot there in Pasco, it was really in the middle of the night, and there were probably upwards of 2,000 people mulling around. Military, Army, and of course Navy personnel, I suppose from the Pasco Navy base, and construction workers. There were little, what we would call taco stands today, and around, and anyway, very interesting, just mulling around. So anyway, we Dad took us out to the at that time the Hanford construction town site, and at which occupied the village area of Hanford, what was Hanford at that time, and in the middle of the night, Dad had brought over a very small trailer house, handmade trailer house, and that's what he had been living in. And at that time, the trailer court for the Hanford construction workers was very primitive. They had put in most of the wash houses and most of the streets, but there was still a lot to be done. And so anyway, we made do, and to begin with, the trailers just sat out in the sun, so to speak. But it wasn't too long before the government realized that they should maybe put some canopies over the trailers to shield the trailers, and so that they'd be more comfortable in the summertime from the heat of the sun, and keep some of the snow and ice and all off during the winter. So they put up canopies. I think the government had the idea that they would not allow anything as far as living quarters in the trailer portion of the Hanford construction site there. But it wasn't too long before they realized, with the number of children and so forth, they were going to have to allow some leeway there and let the people build, small little extensions to the trailer or whatever. And in our case, that was very important because the trailer that Mom and Dad had was very small, maybe 21 foot at the most. And so we built a little lean-to establishment behind the trailer, which was very, very comfortable for my brother and I. By the way, my brother is 5.5 years older than I am, so he went to work almost immediately. He was, 15 and a half, something like that, and he went to work immediately for one of the construction companies in their kitchen. I think he started out as a dishwasher, and he worked there, I think, most of the summer of 1943. But at any rate, we had a nice, comfortable, well-insulated with all sorts of Celotex that we were able to get, and it was very roomy and comfortable. It was great. It served us very, very well. So that gets us to establish there at Hanford, and then of course the rest of the summer for me was roaming around, getting acquainted with various things to do and not to do that I did anyway. And to begin with, the swimming facility, which was very important at that time for the construction workers as well as the people in the trailer court, was in the river, just over the bank, so to speak, from what was beautiful downtown Hanford, which consisted of one gas station and maybe 2 little stores. But anyway, but it wasn't too long before they realized that might not be too good of an idea to have that swim-in area down in the river, because some of the fellows, especially there were a lot of young men there working in construction, and some of them decided that it'd be kind of a challenge to swim across the river. And some of them were getting into trouble. Now, I don't think there were any drownings, but there were some problems, and so it wasn't too long before they went what I call across the highway to the south of the trailer court, about it would have been a good strong mile, I suppose, from the river, and they dug out some beautiful swimming areas, big ponds with nice berms and all to hold the water, and then they brought the water in from the river and flooded those areas and kept them in good shape, and so we had a nice sandy bottom and diving boards, and very, very nice, very nice. So I've rambled along a little bit. Maybe you have a specific question that has come up or something.
Well, you mentioned you did some things that were okay for you to do, and maybe some things that you weren't supposed to do. Any stories from that you want to share?
Maybe. Well, I don't think of any right offhand, but I might mention that. Well, I'm sure I wandered off some, and Mom and probably worried Mom and Dad. But everything was wide open, and the good, at least from my point of view as a youngster there was never any problem for me as a little kid roaming around, and I'll get into some of the detail later, but they went into the barracks of the white guys as well as the barracks of the black fellows, and they keep in mind that this is 1943. This is segregation, right or wrong, good or bad. It was segregated, and there were black barracks, there were white barracks, and there were very, very few black children, but they had kind of a segregated area there in the trailer court for that also. But never any problem, and I spent a lot of time in the black barracks. One of my little sidelights as an entrepreneur out there, a 10-year-old entrepreneur. I got somewhere or other. I got tied in with the Cloverine brand salve people, and I would get these tubes of Cloverine brand salve, and I think there were 10 or 12 in each carton, and I would go to the black and the white barracks both on Sunday afternoons, and sell that salve, and boy, they just gobbled it up. They loved it, and so I made a few dollars that way. I shined shoes, which was quite an activity for kids my age. We had little shoe shine kits. We'd carry them around, and if the guy wanted a shoe shine, we'd 25 cents for a good shoe shine. It was a way to make money, and we enjoyed it. And maybe I'm jumping ahead, but anyway, when school started in the fall, of course, it was during the war. They had a shortage of teachers. They had a shortage of room there at the site to begin with for the school kids, and so we only went school half day, which was pretty tough to take as a kid, but we managed to do it, and so that gave us a lot of free time for activities, playing or making a few bucks doing whatever. So anyway, though, during that summer of '43, got acquainted, and by the end of the summer, the trailer court was in great shape, and it was being added to daily. Might be interested in I forget exactly, but for about every 25 or so trailers, there was what we called a wash house, which in the front of the building, wash house, there would be an area with wash tubs where the ladies could wash clothes, and then immediately across the street there were huge areas to hang clothes. No clothes dryers at that time, and so there were facilities for hanging the clothes, to dry the clothes, and there was a lot of good weather, and for the most part the clothes dried even during the winter. It wasn't too bad. But anyway, the wash house, the laundry facilities were in the front, and then on either side, on one side was the ladies' toilet facilities, showers, and so forth. Then on the other side, the men had toilets, showers, sinks for shaving and all. So, and that would accommodate quite a few. And as I recall, it was around 25 trailers for each wash house. And of course, people could use any of the wash house facilities anytime they wanted to, as they walked around the trailer court or whatever. Plus, as far as toilet facilities were concerned, there were portable, what we would call portables today. They were wooden, but they would accommodate people too, and they had the female and the male outhouses or portable toilets. And another thing very, very important there, throughout the barracks areas, throughout the whole trailer court, there were many, many water barrels. And that's really what they were. They were wooden barrels. I imagine they were an outgrowth of whiskey barrels of bygone days, but they had wooden barrels supplied with ice and water, very clean. Everything was clean. By the way, the portable toilets were kept very, very clean and taken care of in great shape. And the water barrels, and all of the water barrels had salt distributors. The little distributors of salt would have little pills of salt if you felt you needed salt. So, and might add now that in the trailer court, I don't know how many there were, but for every, I would guess, 100 or so trailers, they had an ice house, probably a building of 15 feet by 15 feet, something like that, well insulated, and then filled with ice. And the people from the trailer court could go get the ice anytime they wanted, all they wanted, no charge, and you could go and help yourself. Now, you might say, well, why ice? You know, why not just turn the refrigerator on? Well, at that time, there weren't all the trailers. Most of them were very primitive. Very few with electric refrigerators or electric heat, and so the ice went into the ice chest, or the what we call an ice refrigerator that was cooled by ice. So it was great, and that I might add right here that that free ice was very important to me, because one way of making some dollars or making some money as a kid out there. Well, I guess I need to back up for a second. Virtually all hot water and heating throughout the whole Hanford town site, that in 1944 consisted of about 52,000 people, but all of the heating of the water, heating of the wash houses, heating of the barracks and all was done by steam. It was steamy. So that meant that there had to be quite a few large steam generating facilities throughout the whole Hanford site there to heat the water, to heat produce the steam. Well, that was coal fired, and most of that coal came from up near Clealm. Roslyn was a big coal producing area there, and the truck or train loads of coal were brought in from Roslyn, but the steam plant was important to me because I could go there and I could borrow a wheelbarrow, and I could take that wheelbarrow to the ice house, and I could fill it with free ice. Then I could go to the grocery store and I could buy Coke or Pepsi or whatever they happen to have, put it on that ice, and then push it down to where the buses, and I say buses in quote, but we can talk about that later if you like, but where the buses with the construction people would come in from the outer job sites every night for the guys that living in the barracks and the trailer court, and I would sell that Coke or Pepsi to the that had been on ice to the men. I think I bought it for something like a nickel a bottle. They didn't have cans at that time, nickel a bottle, and I sold it for a dime. So pretty good deal.
That's good profit.
Good profit. Good profit. Yeah. So anyway, that tells you about the ice houses. It tells you about the wash houses. Yeah, of course, those wash houses. It was kind of interesting because every morning there would be. It was kind of like an anthill. You'd see the ladies walking over and the men walking over, and shaving, showering, whatever, taking care of their needs for the morning there to begin with. So it was good. It was the government, or we could say the Corps of Engineers, because the Corps of Engineers really ran Hanford. That was their thing. They bent over backward to help people enjoy, to the degree possible, the living quarters, and they wanted to keep the people there to work. And so they had a lot of activities for the kids. We had tumbling and then, as I mentioned, swimming, and they had softball and all sorts of things. And of course we could work. The older kids, bowling at that time, which it still is to some degree today, bowling was very, very, very widespread throughout the whole country, and there were several bowling alleys there at Hanford, and the older kids, the like 14, 15, 16, they didn't do the shoe shining and selling the pop and some of these other uh, uh, less important jobs. They were pin setters because at that time you didn't have the automatic pin setters in bowling alleys, so they would go and set pins, and they apparently made good money setting pins and all. Plus, as I mentioned, by the time a kid was 15, they could work in the cafeteria, or what we call mess halls, really. I suppose the mess hall term came in from the military there, but anyway, huge dining areas, we'll put it that way. So anyway, I'll stop for a minute, see if you have any questions. I'm kind of rambling here, but
No, that's all great stuff. You said something about the buses. You want to talk about the buses a little more, or describe them a little bit?
yeah, the really the transportation that was provided for the workers from Hanford out to the various areas, and in some cases, I suppose they had to go upwards of 15 miles, maybe 20 miles, and so kind of glorified cattle cars, really. I mean, for the time, it was good, but they were wooden benches in these. Actually, they were semi trailers that had a tractor, a truck tractor attached, and they would haul, I suppose, 30, 40 workers. And the poor guys, during the summer, they'd pull into where they, kind of the disembarking area there. And those poor guys, I mean, their tongues were virtually hanging out because, I mean, they'd come through this, this very hot ride in this very hot vehicle, and that's why they really sucked up those iced Cokes and all. So anyway, but that's
okay.
Enough of. Actually, I might add that the grade school age kids, grade 1 through 8, they went to school there at Hanford, but the high school age, 9 through 12, they were transported into Richland for their high school years, and they rode those cattle cars too. They had buses or anyway transportation to and from, but it was pretty crude. But they got in.
So could you talk about the school a little bit? You went to school at the Hanford town site, and talk about that a little bit, what that was like.
The white building that is still out there, or kind of shot up and beat up, but which was really the Hanford High School. That's where the they had, I don't know, probably 8, 10, 12 classrooms, and that's where I attended 5th and most of 6th grade there in that school. But then they also had many Quonset huts outside the school, immediately adjacent to the school, and they had a lot of classrooms in those Quonset huts too. So I don't know how many all told kids that they would have had in the school, and all had to be hundreds, but I don't know how many hundreds, but there were a lot.
Was it close enough for you to walk to, or did you have to?
In my case, it was a piece of cake. I only lived about 3 blocks from that we would think of today as blocks, and it was real simple. And they named the streets like Egypt and such as that. I happen to live on Egypt Street. I guess it was actually the 2nd block, and the trailer space number was 20, so my address was E220. But now some of the kids, that'd been a pretty good hike for them. I suppose some kids, I suppose, had to walk upwards of a good mile, and no buses at all at that time for the school kids and all. Uh, uh, the, the the teachers, bless their hearts, I'm sure they did the best they could. It was, but they had both morning and afternoon sessions. And I imagine by the end of the day they were pretty tired cookies, but they did as well as they could, and they were well respected and taken care of. And basically, it was the 3 R's, at that time. And
were you morning or afternoon session?
I forget. I at least one year, or either the 5th or 6th, it was morning, because that gave me all afternoon to go. But the second year, or one of the years, I don't remember if it was morning or afternoon. But anyway, yeah. And I'm not so sure. I don't remember. It could be that after one semester, they flipped us. Also, if we'd been going morning, maybe in the afternoon, then they switched to afternoon, or vice versa. I'm not sure. I think maybe that happened. So, in case there was some reason that they thought it was better for the kids to be turned around there.
So the high school building was there, and you mentioned a gas station, maybe a couple of grocery stores. Were there a lot of buildings still from the Hanford town site still there, or had some of them been torn down?
I think for the most part, those that had been were there to begin, they retained them, like a gas station and a couple of small stores. But the Corps of Engineers, I suppose under contract, had there in the trailer court, there were probably 3 very large grocery stores, and I remember, I believe, at least one large grocery store over in the vicinity of the barracks, where the people out of the barracks could go, and if they wanted to get food, or maybe some clothing, this type of thing. And of course, those stores were well stocked, but just jam packed, and so you had, just as everywhere out at Hanford, you had long lines, whether it was a post office, which was general delivery, or stores or whatever. So it was, in fact, some kids made some money standing in line for people. They would go and stand in line for Mrs. Jones at the grocery store, and when Mrs. Jones got her groceries, they'd come over, and naturally the kid had moved up several spaces. So anyway, it worked up. There were all kinds of interesting things. Like to go back just a minute to the the barracks and the grocery store there, and the mess halls. Although they were fantastic. The food was excellent. That served the people, and the mess halls provided, if the guys wanted them, lunches to carry out to their work site, so that they didn't have to prepare them, which would have been pretty tough in the dormitories. But the mess halls served excellent food, and actually the people from the trailer court were welcome anytime they wanted to go to the mess hall, and I think, if I recall correctly, the I don't know about the breakfast and lunch, but the dinners were a great big whopping 35 cents a piece per person. And that was everything. That was family style, and you could eat all you wanted. Mom and Dad and brother and I went to, I can remember at least 2 or 3 times going there for Thanksgiving and or Christmas dinners. And excellent food, excellent. I'll have to tell you a little story there. The one experience, we went, and of course it was family style. It was just benches to sit on and wooden tables. They did, I think at Thanksgiving and Christmas, they did put a tablecloth on, tablecloth. But the one time we went, the one fellow sitting across from us, obviously living in the barracks or someplace, didn't have his family with him. Anyway, he, during the time that Mom and Dad and my brother and I were sitting there having our dinner, he consumed 5 pies. No meat and potatoes. The only thing he's had beside that was coffee. He ate 5 pies. Now these weren't huge pies, but they were pies, and he just took his time. And that's all he had. That was his dinner. But, and you could do that. It was family style. You could have all you wanted, and just go for it. Well, again, I've been rambling. Can I?
Did you and your family eat there fairly regularly? Was there more special occasions that you would go to eat at the mess hall?
The only times I remember, maybe 3 or 4 times, are at Thanksgiving or Christmas. There may have been other times. Sunday afternoon, Dad might have taken us over there. I don't really remember that, though, no. Mom was an excellent cook, and unbelievable what those ladies were able to do with their limited facilities. Again, most of the trailers were very small, very crude. By today's standards, they would have been just shacks by today's standards, but they did great. However, there were some manufactured trailers and even with inside toilet facilities and all. But that was very rare there in the trailer court.
So you were about 10 years old when you moved there?
When I was 10 in April of 1943, and we got there in June of 1943. So I was 10 and 2-3 months, yeah.
So did you have any idea what this big project was, why your dad had come out here to work?
No, Bob, at that time there were just a handful of people who really knew what was going on. And most of them didn't have a great idea. I mean, they'd been told that it was, well, just for an example, a man that I later worked with on the Hanford project, he had come here as an expert in radio communication. And it was he and the crew that he had that put an antenna up on Gable Mountain. And he was told that okay, this is of course super secret, and one day we will tell you more. And he said that before B reactor went online, they came to him and said, okay, now B reactor is going to go online because of thus and thus and thus, and we don't have any idea what it will do, if anything, with the radio communication, radio waves, maybe nothing, but be alert to the fact, you're the man, and so he said, but when it went online, no problem, no change, but anyway, he that was interesting that he had to say. I don't know if the name Rob Lee Johnson means much to anybody anymore, but he was the official photographer, and he was a young man, and he was all over that place taking photographs and all. And I later got to know him pretty well when in the 1950s when he had his photography shop here in Richland, and he shared some things that he thought was real interesting, but even he didn't know what they were doing. But so few did, and I suppose a few that did, they just said nothing. And of course, the old Desert Inn Hotel here in Richland, that basically was on the ground there where, what is it, Hanford House or whatever they call it now. Anyway, it housed a lot of very famous people, but again, most of them were there with code names, so anyway, yeah.
Do you remember when you found out what what was being built out at Hanford?
Kind of interestingly, in, I guess it was August of 1945, Dad decided he needed a few days off, so we took a vacation. Went over to the Seattle area, actually up to Everett, and then back down to Auburn, and visited some people. And it was, as we were going down I guess the old 99 highway, Dad had the radio on, and it said, "Hey, guess what? There across the mountains at Hanford, this is where the material for the second bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki came from." And that's where we learned. And so when we got back over here, though, then there was a lot of, all sorts of interesting things brought out. So, yeah. So that's what we found out.
So how long did you live the trailer then?
Okay, we lived in the Hanford construction town site there from June 20th of 43 until, I'm not sure of the exact date, late March 1945.
Okay.
And by that time, they moved everybody out of Hanford. All the barracks, trailer court, again, anticipating that something could happen and we would have been downwind from the B reactor. And so then, yeah, we dispersed. And many of the people were able to move directly into Richland that went to work in operations. They moved directly into Richland, but not everybody they weren't able to house everybody. My dad went to work in operations from construction there, but we had to find a place, and we wound up in a house with a couple of other families down in what we know as Columbia Park today, where the gazebo is today. That's where the house was, and so we lived there from end of March until it was early July, I guess, when we got a house in Richland.
Oh, okay.
And moved into Richland, and the family lived in that house till, Mom and Dad, until in the 90s. So they lived there for better than 50 years.
It sounds like, for someone who was 10, 11 years old, as you were, that the living in the construction camp was quite an adventure in many ways.
It was. It was a wonderful opportunity.